First thing I must tell you, it's complicated to explain. I'm born in Jerusalem, okay?
Yeah.
I'm born in Jerusalem in a Tour mountain, okay? But I can't visit Jerusalem now. I can't enter. I'm studying like 7 years in Jerusalem, and now I can't enter. And my mom, she have a cancer, and my hospital in Jerusalem, my mom she can go, and sometime I can go to visit her in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is for me, it's like everything for my life. I'm born there, I'm studied there, all my life there, but I can't enter there because we have upper height wall. Because between me and Jerusalem, it's like a 1 kilo only. But now, if I need go to Jerusalem, I need a permission. I must have a paper for permission for a hospital, and I must go to checkpoint. Like maybe I'm waiting hour, 2 hour, 3 hour for like maybe 1 kilometer or something like that.
I didn't grow up in a religious home at all, but I was told from very early age that I'm Jewish. I didn't really understand what that meant, apart from my father going to pray 2 or 3 times a year in the synagogue, and that was it. We didn't have no religious upbringing whatsoever. At the age of 14, which is a very impressionable age, I read Leon Uris's Exodus, and I found my identity. I wanted to be, all of a sudden I was proud to be Jewish. I felt that I didn't belong in England. I didn't identify with England, or England didn't identify with me. And I wanted to live in the country belonging to the Jewish people. I was very naive, but I only saw the good things, and it took me a long time before I saw reality.
Spent quite a lot of time in Jerusalem. My father was born in Jerusalem. Most of my family live in East Jerusalem on the Palestinian sort of side of the city. And so a lot of the things that Avital discusses in the show are things that I really recognise in the divisions between different people within the city.
My parents met in a DP camp in Germany. My father was an American soldier. My mother was a displaced person, a DP. She had grown up in Poland and managed to survive through the Holocaust. She had left her family when she was 17, trying to make her way to Israel, but didn't succeed, and spent the war years in Germany in hiding. She lost her entire family, except for an uncle that had moved to Israel in the 30s.
We moved to Israel 52 years ago when we were 18 years old, right after high school. And Avital we have another daughter, Yosefa, who was born in 75, and Avital was born in 78.
I also think that Avital's show, what I really like about it is that it actually raises a very specific experience of growing up in Jerusalem during the 80s, which is obviously Avital's experience. But by doing that, she shows the way that an individual is impacted by a particular set of political circumstances. And to me, that's much more important and much more interesting, is thinking about how things affect individuals and smaller groups and communities, because really that is where the politics is located. So although there's always a need to look at the bigger picture, we often miss a lot of the nuance of a particular set of circumstances. And so Avital's work is playing a part in helping, I think, to actually show people what is going on on the micro level and the level of the really important details.
I grew up with in a fundamentalist Christian household, even though I'm not Christian anymore. So there was a big pro-Israel component to the religion. In the church and stuff, there were a lot of, we used to sing lots of songs in Hebrew, and it would send money to Israel to like support Israel. And there's like in the church a very overt support for the Israeli government, let's say it like that, because of the Bible and the kind of strict kind of adherence to the Bible that the fundamentalists take, like that kind of the chosen people. I'm completely not in that anymore, but it is something I grew up with. Friends are still in that, they'll have on their Facebook, they'll have like, the Israel flag and stuff, quite publicly, in Germany,
Probably the main resonance, and this is quite a broad one, was the fact that the time period that Avital portrays in the performance was a time when I was living in very, very close proximity. She was in Jerusalem and I was in Gaza.
I grew up between the ultra-Orthodox world. I hope you understand the terms. The black hat community to the secular world. I grew up between my parents lived in the West Bank. And I grew up between that and also being gay. So everything kind of like mixed together. So I also grew up with, before 1995, we actually had, I dare to call it Palestinian friends. The family who built our house in the West Bank became friends with us. So I grew up in a very cosmopolitan state.
I have spent 2 years in Palestine. I was in Gaza for 2 years. And I was a teacher in university. I lost some of my students who were killed by Israel's bombings. I lost a lot of friends and obviously a lot of heartache, injury, people who haven't been able to travel.
Both my husband and I were in a Zionist youth movement, and when we were very young, we decided to go and move to Israel because after the Holocaust, this was a very exciting endeavor, to help build a Jewish nation, and we were very connected to that reality.
Our youth movement at the time spent all its time, or the majority of its time, in Jerusalem, and I always felt the people who came back were a little bit brainwashed. Either became a lot more traditional in their religion and found it difficult to settle back in, really quite ideological in terms of their attitude to the state of Israel. And it was problematic.
My grandmother and my grandfather, they were about 13, 14 in the Second World War. But they were each of them part of the Hitler Youth, because that's what was the thing back then. And I have spoken a lot with my grandmother. They're both deceased now. But I've spoken a lot with my grandmother about it, and she the way she explained it was that it was a fashion, like it was an actual fashion. There was, when you were part of the Hitler Youth, you, as a young girl, they got these cardigans with designs on them, and that was all the rage, having the cardigans. And they also had the braids into, like it was fashion just a few years ago here.
In 2012, I wrote a song called The Edinburgh Surprise that describes a drunken sexual encounter between an Israeli woman and a Palestinian man in Edinburgh. I performed it many times in the UK, US, Germany, and Israel, and it sparked up some controversy. After performing it in a benefit for Gaza in Manchester in 2014, I was bombarded with hate mail from Manchester Jews telling me I'm a disgrace to my people and my family is ashamed of me. When performing it in Berlin, a young German woman came up to me and asked how I can live with myself being an Israeli. I was asked to screen the video of my song in a fundraising event for Gaza in London, and 2 female Palestinian poets who were booked to read said if my song was played, they would boycott the event. The Herald Scotland said it was likely to be the most compelling thing you hear all year. I felt compelled to keep performing it, and a few years later I developed it into a one-woman show. The show is called My Jerusalem, and it uses this song broken up and interspersed with stories of growing up in the political turmoil of 80s Israel. When performing it last year in Sheffield, where I'm now living, in 1 month I was both called an Israel-hating anti-Semite by the Jewish Chronicle, a paper I had never heard of till I found my name and photo published, with a list of other supposed anti-Semites, and a Zionist racist by someone who wrote a complaint letter to Migration Matters Festival. They wrote, "For an Israeli to entitle her play My Jerusalem is itself a political statement and one that omits the fact that another people, namely Palestinians, also lay claim to that city. This was not at all my intention. In fact, the name of the show is a quote from an ultra-Orthodox Jewish woman who slapped me, age 16, on the bus in Jerusalem for being dressed immodestly. And she ends her monologue in the show with, 'This is my Jerusalem, not just any old town.'" The intense reactions from both sides the show received made me want to research in another film the powerful emotional responses that people bring with them. Lots of people have their own Jerusalem. Christians, Muslims, Jews, William Blake. It's a place heavily laden with people's pains, hopes, and projections. This show is about my experience of Jerusalem. It's an exploration of the politics of division, from internal checkpoints and separation walls to gender norms. It's about my ethnicity, gender, racism, and the underlying fear that perpetuates it. Can we surmount divisions imposed by occupation? Can we go beyond the blame game, beyond slogans, and really see each other's all too vulnerable humanity?
It has a very special atmosphere, Jerusalem. It has a special light, it has a special sound. All this about Jerusalem of gold is so true. That's what you feel. It's the stone. The buildings were only allowed to be faced in Jerusalem stone for many years. I think it may still be that way, I'm not sure. And the whole city has an aura. And again, I'm not a religious person or particularly spiritual person in any way, but you feel like, you see these photographs of light, rays of light coming out of golden places. That's the way you feel when you're in Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is a really complex place. Not everybody can live in Jerusalem. All of the tensions in Israel are concentrated in Jerusalem. The tension between Palestinians and Israelis, as Avital says in the play, there's East Jerusalem, which is Palestinian, and West Jerusalem, which is Jewish. And that tension is really felt. The other tension that is really concentrated in Jerusalem is the tension between secular and religious, which is a big tension in Israel, and it's also concentrated in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is a very heavy place, and I find myself sometimes going to Tel Aviv to air out.
I've very much got a love and hate relationship with Jerusalem as a physical city. I love the history, the feeling, the overload of senses that one gets there, with all the spices, the smells, the sights, the variety of peoples that you can experience within the city. And at the same time, it's very much not my city.
Jerusalem is the heartbeat of the country in terms of both the movement toward peace and also the animosity, because people live so closely together and there's not a real crossing of lines there like we would like it to be.
It's such a strange mixture of histories, the modern and the old, and it's like you expect it to be a really spiritual place, but it can feel like a theme park as well. I mean, I say that, I mean, I've got a little piece of the Wailing Wall that a guy gave me when I was at Lancashire Care with that poem, you know, if you forget Jerusalem, may my right arm, my right hand be cut off. You know, I still have that yearning, yes, deep within me. And, you know, as part of your prayers, you face towards Jerusalem when you're saying your prayers. So yes, it is embedded within me, but I know that it's part of the problem. It's a big part of the problem that you have to let go. You know, it can't belong to anyone. This space, it's got to be a shared space.
As Jews, we grow up, and she talks about this in her play also. There's this concept of, she calls it the Jerusalem above. Many people call it the heavenly Jerusalem. When I first came here and walked around the streets of the old city, there was all this dissonance for me about the fact that Jerusalem could actually be a normal city where people could live and live an everyday life and buy groceries. It wasn't some kind of ethereal, exclusively spiritual entity. So Jerusalem is fascinating because it has all of those layers, and of course it has millennia of history. Like every time they want to lay a new road, they find the ruins of some Byzantine graves or building or something like that, and it's everywhere. I mean, we're living on that history and the energy that history brings with it.
You know, 530 Palestinian villages were emptied, were cleansed. They've all got their keys and they all know where they're from, and they can't even go there. So when we're talking about the tears and the pain of Jerusalem, they can't even get to Jerusalem. They can't even visit, even the people that used to live there. They can't even enter an emotional state of what it's like to be there, having already had a history and generations of people there.
And for me, Jerusalem is for everybody, not for Jew, not for Muslim, not for Christian. It's for everybody. I think everybody is lying. The Jews say it's for them. Christians say it's for them. And Muslims say it's for them. This country, this Jerusalem is for peace country. But she never see peace anytime.
I think that one of the songs of, I think it's My Jerusalem, she has a phrase in Hebrew that she keeps coming back to. Im eshkachech, what do you say? Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget Jerusalem,
It's like forgetting my right hand.
It's like forgetting my right hand. And you know, this is a phrase that we grew up with, and I think they say it at weddings, and it brings up an emotion for me. And I think that there's something in the play that's very love-hate. You know, I think that as far as Avital has gone to leave this reality, it's in her. And I think she's realized that, you know, more since she's moved to the UK, that she takes it with her.
As a physical space, it doesn't work. It can only work as an imagined space. And, you know, I mean, for me, Jerusalem is, you know, it's a beach in Wales. with flying a kite on a beautiful day. That's Jerusalem. Or it's a place that comes and goes with the moment. It can't be owned. The minute it's owned, then you're in trouble.
I'm performing tonight with my friend Sarah Spies and my partner Christian Berger, and we are performing a score which is called Bring Yourself to the Table. And Sarah and I wrote this when we were in Cape Town doing a residency. We were speaking to artists in Cape Town about their work and its relationship to the politics of South Africa and of Cape Town. And we were particularly interested in ideas around decolonisation. So when we started talking to artists about this, one of the things that came up in the conversation was this phrase, this question, who does or doesn't bring themselves to the table? And so it's kind of a movement, almost meditation around that question of who is able to bring themselves to a particular discussion, who chooses not to bring themselves, who cannot bring themselves, and all of those ways in which we bring ourselves to a discussion.
Avital and I had been in contact with each other for quite a long time. The museum was considering how it might approach questions over Israel in its programming, which it hadn't done previously. And so this is the first time that we're addressing that through our arts programming.
I can see how you can take elements of performance, or like the fact that the prominence of say the Palestinian experience in the narrative isn't really, it's not there. So I can see that. But then I guess I would counter by saying that this is art, and art doesn't necessarily always have to be explicitly like the news. Art needs to allow the audience to interpret and fill in and imagine. So while, as I said, there wasn't any explicit, there weren't any Palestinians in the story, well, that wasn't her lived experience at the time.
It reached somewhere that actually just straightforward issues about the conflict, back and forth, don't do.
It made me think of the political in the personal, and the personal in the political.
You've all got experience of working or living in areas of conflict. So as artists, do you feel like artists have an obligation to focus on those issues if you're experiencing them? Do you think that should be a focus of your work?
It's not an easy question, and it's not easy to respond to it in any kind of concise way, but I think what this relationship with these fantastic women has opened up for me in terms of my own practice and the way I come to projects or kind of invite projects or facilitate or support projects is that often it's about the kind of sitting with paradox. Division is always paradoxical somehow because you're always in it yourself, and in areas of conflict where I also grew up in terms of real separation and real tension, that I think art creates a space where you can perhaps engage with paradox in a way that's not only reparatory but also shows you the real tension. Art creates a space that does open, and tension is part of the world we currently all occupy, and I think coming towards that and perhaps what these kinds of conversations do is to invite you to bring yourself to the table.
If we're producing art
to ideally engage towards peace or engage towards conflict resolution or some sort of solution of some kind that is better than where we're at now. My only query is just whether or not it is then partly your responsibility, even though this is your experience, to bring a slightly bigger narrative from the other side. Because when we talk about South Africa and Mandela and Tutu and Mandela's grandson, who have all said what's happening to Palestinians is worse than apartheid, at what point are we going to elevate and expand Palestinian voices? And obviously you're only going to give your own voice, which I understand, but at the same time, is there a responsibility then to elevate voices that are otherwise silenced, like perhaps we would have done with the blacks in South Africa?
Again, like as a Palestinian, I guess I'm very cautious, I guess, of narratives and narratives that come from people in, I guess, like what you could say is a more dominant or privileged position. As you know, when we're talking Avital in Israel vis-a-vis me in Palestine, she's coming from that more dominant or privileged position, and so I guess like what I'm questioning is there in any way a responsibility of the artist to bring out like a narrative that checks their privilege in that respect? I don't know the answer for that question, but I guess I'll leave it open.
Another thing, she have a song for Avital story, love story between she and another Palestinian man, and she walking alone and she drink and she catch his hand, and last thing she knows she's a Palestinian, and I think everybody's go alone after she do everything.
In a way, the beautiful thing about it is that the scene is demeaning for both sides.
Edinburgh Surprise was horrendous when I first heard it, and of course my first question was, I hope that wasn't true, or it's not a true story, and she reassured me that it's fiction.
I knew the song about her relationship with the Palestinian man in the past. I don't like the song. I have a lot of antagonism towards it on a lot of different levels, but I thought that she presented it well in the performance.
I was uncomfortable, with hearing about the Intifada without context. That made me feel uncomfortable. I felt like the song, I've heard it before, and out of context, that song is funny. I got fucked in the ass for peace. But there were elements of it that were, I don't know, felt like, are you making light of a situation? Like how would I feel if I was living under occupation and I was hearing that?
And I think that for her to present it in a balanced way was a real journey, because I think that Avital is very left-leaning, and again, left by Israeli standards, and you see it in the song that she brings in pieces about this interaction that she had with the Palestinian, and she says, I got fucked in the ass for peace, it's the least I could do.
It's the first time I heard it, it was like, I was very shocked. And I was shocked for two reasons. First was the real negativity from it. That it's really felt like there was no individuals feeling that they were pawns in a play, and they had no autonomy and real ability to change the narrative. I think that left me very depressed.
We were in Edinburgh 20 years ago at the Fringe Festival, and this was before cell phones. We were watching TV, the news in the morning, getting dressed, and there was a bus that blew up in Jerusalem. It was a bus that blew up on a route that our kids take every day, very frequently. So we ran out in our pajamas to a public phone to call home and see if everyone's okay.
The heaviness of the Holocaust, it's really, really heavy in Israel. And what can we do? This is our past. It's our past. And as Avital showed, the whole country stops on Holocaust Day, stops for an hour in the street. It's a few minutes when the siren goes, that everybody remembers. And I presume in Jerusalem, it's much heavier.
We're not willing to let the Holocaust go, and we have to keep remembering the Holocaust. And everybody that comes to Israel who's a dignitary has to keep remembering the Holocaust and is forced to go to this museum, this Wonderland, I think she calls it, or Disneyland, or whatever. Israel is a country impacted by the Holocaust, whether we like it or not. People are second generation, third generation. They're impacted.
When I was a teacher in school, every single Holocaust Day, there was a group of kids who went, high school kids, who would go to Poland to the camps. And then they would come back, and it was their job to put the atmosphere of the camps over to the rest of the school in some way, in some artistic way. It could be in dance or art or drama or anything. And then we would have some sort of ceremony, and I would sob my heart out every Holocaust Day. And when Avital brings it on, this heaviness of the Holocaust, I can see that as a child, she's a third generation survivor. And also growing up in Jerusalem, where the ceremonies are, and Yad Vashem is the big memorial museum. It's there, and it's heavy, and it's black. So I could, it made me think, what are we giving the kids? Where these children growing up with all these things, maybe something's wrong here.
She went every day to this children's choir. It became her life. Every summer they went abroad and sang. And when she was 14, the whole molestation issue came out, and I was actually brought in as a therapist to talk to the girls, and all I could think of was, thank God Avital was not involved, and thank God this did not happen to her. And then when she was 21 and she went to a Vipassana meditation, and this is very, very common with trauma and sexual molestation, for memories to be repressed, sometimes for many years and sometimes for life, that they'll never come out. And at 21, she suddenly remembered what happened, and it all came flooding forward, and she spent about 10 hours crying. And she remembered that when he took her home, she said to herself, I won't remember this tomorrow morning. And she didn't remember it the next day. So we went through this whole crisis with the choir, but she wasn't really involved because there was no connection to it.
So Germany was very, at a long time in the 50s, and we learn about this in school, of reflecting on what happened there. So every year you go into more depth or different aspects of it, and they take you to the actual concentration camps to see. They have educational trips to show you what happens. They discuss it. They, you read about it. You see the films. Again and again, because there's just such a big emphasis on this should never happen again. Which makes it really difficult as well to see the rise of fascism again. It makes it hard for me. I never thought in my lifetime, after this education that I had, where from 13, 14 till about 19, every year in school I would discuss this, I never thought that I'd see like the rise of another right-wing populism. But here we are. It's shocking to me.
Whether she intended it or not, it's a very strong metaphor for the people who founded the State of Israel. These are the most abused peoples, some of the most abused peoples certainly in Europe, and they're all brought together to try and create a nation out of conflict and then in the midst of conflict. That's not a great place to build a nation.
Not disrespectful, but making light of something that's a real issue. A real issue not only in terms of that the Holocaust is kind of the incarnation of the most extreme depths that humanity could ever sink to, but also making light of the amount that it's impacted our national psyche here as Israelis. Yeah. And Jews, not just Israelis, like the way it's impacted the Jewish psyche.
And now I can't go anymore to any ceremonies. I can't take it. Even just talking about it makes me want to cry. I can't take all that sadness anymore.
What basically was so profound for me that she captured the situation so precisely, that everybody's clinging to their hurt, rightly so or not rightly so, but everybody's clinging to the hurt, and everybody, I mean, it's difficult for me to admit because my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and then they came to Israel, and from the history that we were taught, the young Israel state was repeatedly attacked. So it's kind of like, and then it combined so smoothly with her personal story as a victim, and it's like we are always convinced that our story, we are the person who suffered the most. And well, you can objectively, for me, it's not really objectively, but objectively, subjectively says nobody went through something like the Holocaust. Only the Jews did. And so the post-traumatic people finally got a little piece of heaven to go home, and the Arabs attacked them again and again. It's kind of like, if I'm looking from a very narrow my side narrative is, what do you want from us? I mean, we want to have peace, but we're post-traumatic, and nobody acknowledged that, and nobody is understanding why it's so hard for us to let go. But then, if you look at the history of the Palestinian people, they also suffered significantly, and it's really unwise to try to measure who suffered more, regardless of the facts. It doesn't matter.
And we're all trying to survive as best we can. I think that her point was well brought out by the ending song that she sang, the so-called goat song, with the variation that Chava Alberstein added to it, that I very much identified with those words, with that sentiment that mourns the fact that we're no longer just victims, we're also perpetrators. We have to ensure our own survival. We've done things that I wish we didn't, I wish we couldn't. One of the mantras of the Israeli army is to fight and to cry at the same time, to cry that you have to fight, to cry that you have to kill someone. And that's a sentiment that lots of people have, but some people don't. And some people are very happy to shoot, to pull the trigger and shoot and cause suffering. And that causes me suffering to see.
I thought it was perhaps somewhat of an affront. I accept it as part of the whole, but when she gets lost in the hills and she has a dream, or she's in between a dream, reality and fantasy, of men marching with torches, it's Nazis. And the men marching and the militarism is Nazis. And I can understand where people would see the whole thing and they would say, but she's saying that the Israelis are Nazis. She wasn't saying that, but I think that was a bit much. What was true and what she was right to show, and I don't know whether any other people would understand it as such, there was a picture of Hitler, there was a picture of a Nazi officer. It was Rabin, the Prime Minister Rabin, who was assassinated, who was portrayed as a Nazi by the right-wing, rabid, fanatic nationalists, including, whether he held one of these signs or not, our infamous Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He was present at these demonstrations when this picture was held, when this portrait of Rabin as a Nazi was held. And did he do anything about it? Did he say anything about it? No, he did not. He encouraged it. I wasn't really interested in going in the army, to tell you the truth, and I had certain medical problems. I had asthma. When you go to be evaluated for the army, they give you a profile, and they give you from 90. No Jew, by the way, can have 100% health. No male Jew. You know why, don't you? Well, he's been circumcised. He's had 10% chopped off. So the highest military profile you can get is 90. I got 45%, which is only half what you can get. And they said, all right, don't bother. But they did call me out for reserve duty. I was always very astonished about that, because they called me up for reserve duty, and I served more reserve duty than active fighters. I served until I was 56 in reserve duty, and active fighters are released at the age of 45 and even less now. They wouldn't let me out till I was 56. I had all sorts of duties to do and to perform, and they actually sent me once or twice, once into the West Bank, where I had to make sure that the roads were open, and I had to fire rubber bullets at demonstrators sometimes. I'd never actually been in the army. Before each stint of reserve duty, they gave you 3 days of training, and they let you fire about 3 rounds on your rifle and a few rounds here and there. You learned how to throw a grenade by throwing a rock or something.
Sometimes it's good. The soldiers, like when I throw some, it's all, everybody in the checkpoint. I meet him like because near my home is checkpoint. It's like young people, same my age or younger. It's like 25, 24, 29. And hi, it's my permission. This my permission. Yes, okay. They check check everything in machine and check you and check your fingerprint and everything. Yeah, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes they will be like say, if he have a gear or something, he have a big boy, he have a big machine gun, and he needs to stop everybody, and he try to be like a hero, because he stopped for no reason or say bad word for no reason. But another time we have some noise, like in the checkpoint, all in the checkpoint, not who's come to fight or something. Who's sitting in the computer. Some people help you, some soldiers, they no.
All Israeli men, when they go to them, don't let anybody tell you any otherwise, they go to be one of the lads, one of the blokes. You get a month away with all in with meals and with your blokes, and you can tell jokes and you can fart and you can do what you like, you know, and that's a big part of Israeli male society.
Sometimes they make the people so rude, or if he need go to eat or just sitting and he need to make a problem. Like sometimes we waiting like 3 or 4 hours for no reason, because the soldier, he don't need open. He just like you shouting, or like you just sitting like an animal in the zoo. in the zoo, just waiting the food or waiting the water.
If she'd have set out to portray Israel as most people here in general see it, there's the bad and there's the good, and the army does great things as well as having to perform bad things. The army does a lot of great things for education, integration, education, helping people. I know that when I was seconded to the West Bank, and I wanted to help people, and people came with the problems, and they had to go across the barriers to get to hospital or something. I was there to help, in my opinion.
I'm under occupation. If I'm walking around the checkpoint and I feel down, you must come to help me, because I don't have any Palestinian police or any Palestinian hospital to come to help me, or clinic. I'm under occupation. That's your job. It's not help. You say about we help Palestinians, and we see a lot of people, like a lot of photo. It's about some soldier, some woman, so like a disabled woman, or she can't walk, and they help her. But you kill 1,000 of women, and now you take a photo for this reason. Don't tell me, like, maybe if you say some Israeli person help Palestinian for find work or something, I say yeah. But if you say the soldiers help Palestinian people, what? For what? Give me example. I have like more than 14 rubber bullets in my body. Because I never go to demonstration. I don't go anywhere from inside university. I'm just sitting with my friends, like just sitting, and we hear a lot of tear gas around us and shooting a lot of bomb and rubber bullets. And rubber bullets, you know, the rubber bullets is like a jump, like a bandage, put on the wall and come. And I have a lot in my body and a lot of friends. I don't do anything bad. I don't do anything wrong. I don't make anything bad. I'm just sitting and study. If that's illegal, is that we can do it? I don't know.
After I did this stint of duty, a month in the West Bank, I said, I'm not going back there. And every so often you were called up for this or that, or this guard duty on a border settlement. That was all fine by me. But from when they finally called me up, and I think I was about 50 years old, they called me up to do reserve duty in the West Bank. I said to myself, I'm not going there. And I went to the army and I said, look, to the officer, I said, you can't send me there. Why not? I said, I've never done any army service. I said, you give me a gun, I'm allowed to shoot somebody. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea how to shoot. I might shoot somebody I'm not supposed to shoot. So they said, all right, go away. And after 2 weeks, they called me in and they said, okay, from now on, your duties are to press the button on Holocaust Day on the siren, sound the siren. And that I had to do until I was 56, and then they finally let me out and they gave me a certificate, and that was the end of it.
We spent a lot of time together as families, but Avital was young, and I didn't realize that we had an effect on her. I think that a lot of the impact was that we represented as a couple. I'm trying to think of what the word is in English. There are some words that I use more frequently in Hebrew, and I have to think about it. There was a joining there of the two sides. There was a lot of solidarity that was virtually, when I married Ziad, it was virtually unheard of. Okay. We did ultimately get divorced, but it was not because of the fact that I was Jewish and he was Palestinian. It was because it was hard living together as a couple for personal reasons. But we did stay quite good friends after that, after the initial hostility passed. We got back to being very close. We have 2 children together.
It's the first piece of theatre that I'd really seen from someone who'd really grown up in that situation, and how that politics of division impacts people who've grown up in that environment. Because most of our involvement as Manchester Jewish Museum is with people who have a really close relationship with Israel, but probably not necessarily people who've grown up and been so shaped by the politics of Israel.
It is being weaponized, so anybody that is wanting to push things or wanting to criticize Israel are being called anti-Semites. It is, for me, it's really offensive. It's offensive to Jewish people. I mean, I'm Jewish. It doesn't even mean that you're doing, it could be just the tiniest thing that you're doing and you get accused of anti-Semitism, just a small amount of criticism.
And here she is, she's living outside of Israel. All of her family is here, and she's chosen to make her life not here. Right? It's hard for me to say that I don't think she's an anti-Semite. I think that there are aspects of anti-Israelism in her, very strong aspects. And that was the reason I blocked her on Facebook, because I didn't want to see her comments, which I felt were very anti-Israel. And it's not just, for Israelis, it's not just that she's anti-Israel, it's that it's like airing your dirty laundry in public. So if an Israeli says, oh, Israel's brutal and kills Palestinians all over the place and they're a horrible country, so then people who really are anti-Israel and really are anti-Semites will say, oh, here's an Israeli backing up how I feel. And they know because they lived it. So all of that is involved with an Israeli having anti-Israel sentiments.
There's a whole army controlling you, every move, every minute of your life. And we're called anti-Semitic for often pointing that out. And that's an outrage. And there are many, many Jewish people who are supporting Palestinians now, especially in America. And they're called anti-Semitic as well, of having that different kind of Jewish perspective.
I see a lot of people who are political activists that forget about their personal life. I think it's a mistake. When I met Ziad, it was interesting. I was heavily involved in political activism in Jerusalem. It was the beginning of the Intifada. We were all horrified, and all we thought about was this issue. And when I met Ziad, who was a Palestinian, all he wanted to do was have fun. He was tired of dealing with this stuff. He wanted to have a good time, and it gave me a tip. It's like you have to make your life about both.
What objectively bothers me is specifically as a gay person, is that if I take the Palestinian controlled areas right now, is I know, because I volunteer with people who escaped there, LGBT people who escaped from there, that their life is in danger, and they have to keep their whereabouts and their life quiet, because even though they escaped, they have family there. So if they're misconduct themselves, I would say, then their family can still get hurt. And I think in my dealing with my community and there are not so good people in my community that oppose my lifestyle and my choices, I've learned to I'm willing to forgive because you're family. But that does not mean that I would not expect you to behave as an adult.
It was the way it was, Nobody tried. I was too small for them to try to explain it, I guess. This was what it was. We can't go to the other side of the city. This one, the S1 that I lived on, that went from south to north and north to south, it would go through the center of the city, but part of the center of the city was East Berlin. So the train would go from West Berlin, cross into East Berlin, and then cross back into West Berlin in the north. So during that time, what it was is that they blocked off all of those train stations, and it was called the Geisterbahnhof, the ghost station, because nobody was allowed to go on and off. You just kind of slowly went past. And I remember going through it with a train, and there just being people with massive guns patrolling the station.
A couple of years ago, by myself, it wasn't with me, I decided to go into East Jerusalem, which is not, it was something that not many people do. You know, all this talk about United Jerusalem, there are places you don't go, places you daren't go. There are even streets and areas in Jerusalem which start off in a Jewish area, and the further you go in, it becomes an Arab area. And we went into one of those areas, and after a while you get to feel a little uncomfortable with the looks and everything that you get, and you know, turn back and retreat and go back to the area where you feel a bit safer.
I have some friends from Israel. I met him in Dead Sea. They're young, like me, gay and boys, nice people. She don't like a war. She love a peace. They like we connection speaking English, sometimes Hebrew, and sometimes Arabic, and we try to connection sometimes, but it's hard to meeting each other because no place.
In spite of the fact that we were ostensibly from opposite sides, we had a lot in common. I didn't grow up in Israel, so I didn't have any built-in racism. He was just a person to me.
Again, for me, the most horrifying thing about the situation for me is the fact that I know that people are being used as human shields, and I don't care if it's because we are in conflict with them. This shouldn't happen. LGBT people are being kicked away from roofs, and Israel has a long way to go till we can say that we're LGBT friendly. But I know people who ran away, and the fact that if in Israel there's always this pinkwashing dogma that we use the LGBT community when it's comfortable, like the government used the LGBT comfortable in Tel Aviv and the so-called liberal and progressive Tel Aviv to PR to the world how a progressive country we are. On the other hand, we don't see the situation the way it is and what the people in Gaza are going through. And I know it's not so comfortable, but eventually I know that the person that built my house and invited my parents to all the weddings of his children picked up the phone in 1995 or 1996 and told them, we can't continue this relationship because it puts me in danger and it puts you in danger if you want to come.
Like first time she starts singing Hebrew, and I was in UK in London, in I think West London, I don't know where is exactly, and I say I don't know, she's okay, she's like Palestinian or she's Israeli or so, and then I go to ask her about situation, about everything, and she said, and we start be friends.
Performance is very much a political act in some way. So I think for me the way she articulates a kind of a shifting identity politics or a shifting identity for herself through the work is really, really beautiful actually, and very powerful and very stimulating in terms of self-reflection, and also how I speak about my own experiences in terms of my history and the kinds of tensions that come up as a South African of a particular moment in the apartheid history also, and the kind of the trauma that situation still perpetuates in a way.
It's not that there aren't a lot of Palestinian Jewish couples today, but at the time I knew of almost nobody that did that had the audacity to to fight the stigma and the risks of being together.
In order to live here, you need to be in a certain amount of denial. Otherwise, you will just go kill yourself. I mean, it's impossible to function without, if you're going to think about what's wrong here all day long.
I worked as a security guard for a while, and when I was finishing the army, and it was one of the better period of time, and again, a lot of workers came from the nearby villages and started building houses and everything in my parents' village. And one day we just sat together and they offered me their food. And I sat down, and they spoke reasonable Hebrew. I knew a few words in Arabic. I forgot them since then. I knew enough to understand what's going on. And you find that there are actually people. After being in the army, and you are forced to search an 80 years old woman, and the tragedy was that the donkey she sat on contained a package of explosives. She could have died at any minute, and she didn't even know. And suddenly you can look at them as human beings again.
When the first Intifada broke out, for example, what saved me was getting politically active. Otherwise, I would have had to leave the country because of seeing the injustice. If I wasn't trying to fix the injustice, then I have no business being here. If I'm going to be part of the problem, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be here.
I was really, really skeptic, and my my right, fanatic, winged, fundamental settler child said, I don't want to see this. This is probably a left-wing propaganda and everything. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful allegory.
Avital touched on what happened to Ziad in the play. We had a terrible year. He was misdiagnosed, but he was dying of cancer. And when he died, my first impulse was to get on the horse and go riding out in the fields. So that's my escape.
There was one piece right at the end, I think it was, where it was a statement. I can't remember whether it flashed up or whether it was something she said, but it all starts from the beginning. And I wrote in response to that, but what is the beginning? This is the beginning of a time where conflict was chosen, but it wasn't always that. There were absolutely times when people lived side by side and next door to each other, and in a sense, one chooses a beginning, and I do believe you can work towards a different ending, at least in one's own lifetime.
One of the things I think Avital says about herself, or maybe it's Ami, my husband, says, is that, Avital's goal in life was to make everybody uncomfortable. And she has made people uncomfortable, since she was born, basically. And, she was always very honest and very raw and very willing to say the things that are shocking. And I think that we have a very open and honest relationship and home life in general, but in many ways, even in this movie, she continues to make us very, very uncomfortable. I'm a psychotherapist. At the moment, I'm seeing mostly couples, and I'm a sex therapist. And I, in no way, see myself as a sexual, as a prude. But the sexuality as a mother, watching this really makes me cringe, and it makes me want to protect her, or oh no, or don't say that, or and kind of like really, you know, you can't. You have to go to the end, to the extreme. And